They say you never forget your first, especially your first electric guitar. Now, I was always proud to say that my first electric guitar was an American-made Gibson, but I almost lost this guitar. But I'm glad it's still here. You know, some guitar players are more nostalgic than others, but I like owning and keeping sort of key pieces in my history. Well, it's still here. We can still talk about it. Now, some of you are probably wondering what model of Gibson this is. Well, this is kind of a rare model that was made during a very quirky time in Gibson's history. I'm going to talk about all of that today. Why don't you join me? So this is a Gibson Challenger 2. This was part of a series that Gibson put out in the early to mid 80s called the American series. Now, this series was likely created to compete with the Japanese imports that were really getting market share at the time. Think of brands like Ibanez. Now, this line included the Challenger, the slightly upgraded Invader, and this very strange looking guitar called the Corvus. Now, even though Gibson was a well-known American manufacturer, they likely chose this American series name, inexpensive guitars competing with Japanese imports. They just wanted to remind people that these were in fact American-made instruments. Now, unfortunately, that didn't work so well because the line only lasted a couple of years. To understand why these guitars were made, we need to understand the Norlin era at Gibson, often referred to as the crazy Norlin years. In 1974, Gibson was owned by the Chicago Musical Instrument Company and was approached by the ECL Corporation to go into business together to leverage the booming guitar market at the time. So the heads of ECL and CMI, Norton Stevens and Arnold Berlin, merged their businesses as well as their syllables and formed Gibson Norlin. It was during this time that Gibson made a lot of strange decisions. It seemed that the culture of the company was taken over by the corporate bean counters with an eye on profits. I mean, this was a company that had legendary models like the Les Paul, the Firebird, the SG, and the ES lines. But now they favored affordability and profits and came up with some stinkers like the Marauder and the S1. Now, there were some rare successes like the Grabber Bass. This was endorsed by Gene Simmons. Now, they did continue to make their core lineups during this time, but these really strange models that didn't sell well started to have an impact on the company. So the year's 1983, Gibson is not doing very well. The market is getting flooded with Japanese imports and Gibson is feeling a lot of pressure to compete. So the solution? Well, the American series was released, and that included the Gibson Challenger, which in itself had three different models. There was the Gibson Challenger 1 that had a single humbucker, the Gibson Challenger 2, which is a two humbucker pickup configuration, and the even shorter-lived Gibson Challenger 3 had three single coil pickups. The entire line was killed in 1985, and it wasn't long after that that the Norlin era came to an end. Now, Gibson was in real financial straits at the time. A lot of things happened there. It actually took a couple of years until they found a new owner, until Henry Juskowitz came in and rescued the company. Now they got back to their roots and started pushing their core brands, but they did get into a little bit of trouble later on, but we're not going to talk about that chapter in this video. Well, with that crazy history long behind us, the Gibson Challenger is one of those rare, kind of curious models in the Gibson lineup. They didn't make a lot of these, and there's not a lot of them out there. You do see them on the used market, somewhere between like $900 and $1,200. I bought this in 1984-85 for about 200 Canadian dollars. That's about 150 US dollars. And I almost lost this guitar forever. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want to dive into this guitar. I want to show you the different features. Did a couple of modifications to it. And ultimately, I'm sure you just want to hear what it sounds like. All right, let's jump in. Let's start with the specs. So this Challenger is a single cutaway. It's sort of similar to a Les Paul Special, kinda. The wood was marketed as hardwood. They were non-specific, which might imply they were just using whatever they had available. The bolt-on neck is one-piece maple. The fretboard is rosewood with 22 frets and dot inlays. The bridge is a two-pneumatic style with a built-in wraparound. The tuners that came with this guitar were terrible, so my guitar teacher at the time hooked me up with these awesome Gibson Keystone tuners that came off of his Les Paul. I have no idea what the original humbuckers are. If you know what these are, let me know in the comments. Whatever they are, they didn't sound very good, but what I thought this guitar really needed was some P90s. So I installed some Lawler P94s, which are basically a P90 that fits the same space as a humbucker. And lastly, I didn't like the top hat knobs, so I replaced them with these black speed knobs that I pulled off my Les Paul Studio. You've got 2 volumes, 1 tone control, and 1 toggle switch. This guitar actually sat in its case for a number of years until I rediscovered it, and that's when I thought, hey, you know what, I need some P90 style pickups in it, and you know what, I've been using it in my studio ever since. But there was a time that I almost lost this guitar. It was around 1986 or so. The guitar bug had bit me square in the ass, and I was ready to buy my next guitar. I was staring at this brand new Ibanez. Well, there's Ibanez creeping in, but my parents convinced me that I had to sell this before I bought the new guitar. So reluctantly, I found a buyer at the local pizza shop. And there was a guy that worked there that was actually friends with me in a sort of a circle of friends. I have to say, he wasn't the nicest guy in the world to me. But a bit of humanity took over him on this particular day. This guy that worked at the shop apparently was a bit of a shady character, and he paid by check. So my friend said, listen, I'm going to hang on to this guitar. When the check clears, let me know, then I'll give him the guitar. Well, as luck would have it, the check actually bounced. And I was really nervous, but he gave me this guitar back, and that other guy that bought the guitar, or tried to anyways, was long gone from the pizza store. So who knows, this guitar would have been gone forever. But you know what? I was happy I got my hands on it and realized I didn't want to let it go. Convinced my parents to let me buy the Ibanez anyways, and I did. And actually, I still have that guitar. I might talk about that one too at some other point. But you know what? It's a great guitar for what it is. I mean, it's a piece of my history, but with the modifications I've done, it plays great and it sounds great, and I use it a lot here in my studio. And who knows, if you actually track one of these down, it's a great project guitar. If you do find it stuck, a couple little upgrades to it, you've got yourself a great guitar. Well, there's my little tale of the Gibson Challenger 2. I certainly hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, have you played one? I would love to hear from you. That's what the comment section is for. Well, if you did like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you want to do a deeper dive with me, I'm on Patreon. I have affiliate links, I have merch. It's all down below. It all helps the channel, and I really appreciate that. But the most important thing is to check out another video. I've got one waiting for you right here. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. And I look forward to seeing you again in another video.